how's it going? I'm Ben from Universal Audio, and today I'm joined by Senior Product Manager Gannon Kashawa, and we're going to talk about the new Apollo X series. So, how's it going, Gannon?
Hey, man, good. Yeah, good to see you.
Man, before we dive too deep, just at the high level, what are some of the new features that make the Apollo X really stand out?
Okay, well, let's start at the top. The converters are probably the number one thing that we've really spent a lot of time on and really pushed the specs beyond what the components can do and delivering amazing fidelity and just great sound. So conversion is one. Clocking, which is kind of an unsung hero part of the box. I mean, that supports everything on top of it. So by having a really, really clean clocking mechanism, that's another part of it. We've added more DSPs. We have the HEXA DSP, which is new to our platform. We have been sort of capped at 4, so now we have 6 DSPs that gives you more power to run more plugins and get some really, really great sounds out of them. Nice. We've added 24 dBu operation, which allows us to interface with studio gear at the proper level. We've added Talkback to each one of these, so all of our rack mount units now have a Talkback. Thunderbolt 3 connection, and that's another thing that is really great because now we have the lowest latency, the fastest, most modern connection, so we're kind of future-proofing. And then we have 4 units now. In the previous Apollo lines, we've only had 3. So what we've tried to do is level the playing field and make the decision which one should I buy a little bit easier. Now the decision is how much I/O do I need? And you've already got the 6 DSPs. So that's kind of the overview. Yeah.
Nice. Well, I mean, that's an impressive amount of features. I'm sure this was really easy to come up with, right?
Sure.
Nice. Speaking of converter quality, every interface and every converter talks about the converter quality, but what effect does that actually have? How can people hear quality in a converter?
It's so subjective, but my take on that is you get a better view of the audio that you're recording, and the converters are both the A to D side, taking it from the analog world and putting it into the digital world, and then also going the opposite direction, so coming out of the system after it's mixed and coming out to your speakers. So there's 2 places where those converters do their magic. What you're hearing is a more stable sound field, a wider image, solid bass, really super accurate transients, all of the characteristics of the sound. So we're treating both sides of the conversion, the A to D and the D to A, with the utmost care and really focusing on the sound quality. It's not just the converter. That's the thing that people get hung up on, right? We use ESS stacks across all the outputs. Great. The Sabres are wonderful devices, and they sound terrific, but it's the power supply. It's the shielding. It's the components. I mean, we go right down to specifying which components we use in the circuits. Like the right resistor can have an impact on the audio quality. Wow. So, yeah, I would say the converters are a huge part of that, but it's the surrounding circuitry that we've redesigned and employed new in Apollo X's. So. Yeah.
And part of that redesign too, we also reapproached how we do clocking, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
What's the story there?
Well, in any digital system, the clocking is critical to encoding it properly. That's the most important part, where you're actually converting analog sound into digital. What you're relying on is the clock to provide a perfectly even series of snapshots of that audio. If there's jitter in when you're capturing the A to D, then no matter when you play it back, it's going to sound different. And it will affect the way the audio sounds in different ways. But by having a low jitter clock, you're ensuring that what you're encoding is perfect and what you're playing back is going to be perfect as well. So clocking gives you this complete, and in our case, we're using 2 crystals to generate the different sample frequencies, right? Gotcha. In all the digital worlds, we have 44.1, 88.2, 176.4, right? And so those are multiples of 44.1. There's also multiples of 48. So 48, 96, 192 are 2 completely unrelated frequencies. And as typical, most interfaces on the market today use a single crystal to derive all those clocks from. And we use 2 crystals so that we get a really even and very clean multiplication path from 44.1 to 88.2 and so forth. And we're not telling the crystal, okay, you've got to do this tricky math to get from 48 to 44.1. So we have incredibly low jitter in all of our sample rates.
Wow. What is our jitter spec?
Most of these are between 4.5 and 6 picoseconds.
Wow.
So that's incredibly low. I mean, up until this generation, that sort of jitter spec was reserved for, standalone clocks, which, they have their own characteristics. And when you use those in conjunction with any interface, you're taking an external word clock or a ADAT clock or whatever and going back into the box and using it with PLL to translate the external clock. So even if the external clock has like super low jitter, it's not going to translate to the ADC, right? Yeah. It's going to translate to whatever that PLL turns it into, which is going to be higher than what the native clock is. So by having dual crystals and a super low internal jitter, that's where we focused our firepower.
So now it's 2018 and computers have just gotten more and more powerful. Why is HEXA DSP, or DSP just in general, still important to users?
That's an easy one to answer. Real-time audio.
Yeah.
So really the only way to produce a deterministic latency and I/O count and plug-in count for how many things you can actually get is to put audio through DSPs, digital signal processing. They're only doing one thing. They're focusing on, completing an audio task in a number of samples. The computers, you're right, computers are incredibly powerful these days, but they have to manage all of the other systems that are in the computer. They got to look at the keyboard, they have to look at the display, they draw all the pictures, they manage the heat. They're checking your email if you're, on the internet. So all those things are, and then I have a piece of audio I need to process. Whereas a dedicated signal processor, it has one thing to do. So that lets us do this real-time environment, which, you can take audio, plug a microphone into an Apollo, and have it shoot out. And the latency is, 1.1 milliseconds at 96K. It's always been that way.
Yeah.
And it's always going to be that way because we code everything for that amount of speed. So DSPs give you the real-time environment. They give you a predictable amount of power. They give you a predictable performance. It's a professional way of approaching audio. Yes, you can do lots of things on a host computer. There's no question. But just as an example, if you look at our Neve 1073, that's an incredibly complex plugin. So especially when you're doing nonlinear distortions and things that are not easily computed, they have lots of variables, lots of different calculations that have to go into it. There's, on this 1073, there are 17 distortion models on the input side.
Oh, wow.
And we have to keep all those ready to go. So the DSPs are able to do these incredibly complex calculations and do them in real time.
Well, more importantly, as you mentioned, the plugins are getting more and more authentic, which requires more and more processing power.
That's right.
So with the 8P, now with the hexa core processing, you can actually put 1073s across all 8 channels.
With EQs and filters on.
Which is awesome.
Yeah, that's awesome. And to put it in perspective, if you took one 1073 and ran it, unoptimized and just the algorithm and put it on your computer, it would bring your computer to its knees. Because we're never going to skimp on the quality, right? When we model something, we model them from input to output. We model all the nonlinear behaviors, and those are expensive in terms of computational complexity. What's it take to do that? It takes a boatload of processing. I was going to say something else, but it takes a boatload of processing to make that happen. And the idea is we can model it and not skimp on what we want to translate and cause them to still run in real time. Yeah. So DSPs are they're the workhorses of the professional audio industry. And it's going to be that way for quite some time.
The worst thing, right? I'm sure you've been through this when you're pressing play or recording a take, and the computer all of a sudden is like, "Oh, sorry, I forgot what I was doing. Can you guys do that again?" As you're a professional engineer, producer, that's a nightmare moment.
Well, of course, because your remedy to that is, I got to kick up my buffer. And what happens when you kick up your buffer is you get more latency. So the other thing that the DSPs gives you is you're completely divorced from having to rely on your computer's buffer. If your computer is struggling, you can set your buffer to 1024 and still be just fine. And still get the same track count. Now your computer can handle the tracks, can handle your virtual instruments, can handle all of the other things that the computer has to do. And we take care of the audio processing in the DSP. So it's a great marriage.
Yeah, and well, it turns into a great experience for both the producer, the engineer, but more importantly, the musicians.
Yeah.
Because there's no disconnect between what they're playing and what they're hearing.
That's right.
And they also get to hear it more polished.
That's right. The most important mix in the room, headphone mix. But you're getting the benefit of these inspiring sounds right off the bat, and that drives creativity. I mean, it's a fact. So.
Yeah. So I know the Apollos have been like super popular with project studios and producers and engineers, but with the new Apollo X, there's a ton of features that are really oriented towards the pro market. What are some of those features?
For the top of that would be plus 24 dBu operation, which allows you to work comfortably with a console or a tape machine where they're operating at a higher operating level than what the original Apollos were. So we're at plus 24 now, which means you can drive the input 4 dB hotter than where we were. We used to be at a plus 20. It's still switchable, so you can integrate these with a original Apollo or the blackface Apollo. But in plus 24 dBu mode, you can drive the input at unity gain from a tape deck or from a console and output that same level on the output. So if you're driving a compressor or something, to your workflow, you're going to want to drive your equipment into the sweet spot, and this gives you enough headroom on both the input and the output to get you there.
Oh, nice.
So it's a voltage acceptance thing.
Yeah.
It's up by 4 dB on the input and up by 4 dB on the output.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to that. And these also have talkback built into them, right?
Yeah, that's right. Every single unit right above the diamond, there's a talkback, little hole for the talkback mic. So our talkback is actually really cool because it's a routable path. Just like any of the other audio paths, you can record this. So it shows up at the bottom of your I/O matrix list, and you can put plugins on it. So, if the Muse is in the room with you and you want to record a scratch track of some sort, you can easily do that. Just route it to an audio track, engage talkback, it latches, and, go ahead and do your track. And we did some other things.
Oh, yeah? Like what?
Well, that would be surround sound monitoring.
Ooh.
That is a new feature for us. We've now been able to gang the monitor outputs and the line outputs and turn it into a controlled block. So under just the single volume output, you select a surround mode that you want to work in, all the way from stereo to 2.1 to 7.1. It's a super flexible way of using the line outputs and the monitor outputs, and we've done it so that you can switch between stereo and mono without having to repatch your speakers.
Surround sound is a big part of movies, TV, video games, all the immersive audio stuff that's coming out around VR.
That's right.
Being able to work in these different formats is becoming more and more important to engineers and producers. So
That's right.
being able to quickly switch from your normal everyday left to right to a 7.1 setup.
That's right.
And still use the same monitor controller. I know that's the thing that holds a lot of people back, is just being able to integrate surround into their current setup.
That's right. We've tried to think of the little things that are inconveniences that, people run into every day.
Yep. Nice. Very cool. So, with the Apollo X family, there's now 4 units.
That's right.
What's the differences between all 4 of them?
Well, as with previous generations of Apollo, we have the X8, which is this is a direct replacement for the existing Apollo 8. So 4 unison mic preamps, the full complement of digital and other analog lines ins, and the HEXA DSP. So this is kind of the workhorse. He can do anything, and you'll find him in production studios of various sorts, where you've got a mixture of line inputs and mic inputs. The X8P is a direct replacement for the Apollo 8P. So 8 unison mic preamps. This is the guy that you're going to want to record live bands with, and put 3 of these guys together, you have 24 inputs, 18 DSPs. So it's geared for capturing live sound through mic preamps.
Yeah.
The X16 is the direct replacement for the Apollo 16, which is our flagship, designed to be in a recording studio with a console or a tape machine, running lots of outboard, lots of line outputs. And then the X6 is a new member of the family. So the X6 still has the HEXA DSP. It has 2 unison-enabled mic preamps and 6 line outputs and 6 line inputs. So really, this guy is designed to allow people to get into the Apollo X family at a lower price. So you would kind of base your decision on how much I/O do I need? You know, if I'm doing EDM or if I'm doing, you know, post-production pre-dubs or something, I probably don't need to record a lot of things. So I can use the processing power and the outputs to get my 5.1 and do what I need to do in a post mode. So they all kind of, you could put any one of these in any studio.
Yeah.
But, you know, I think it's just the most important thing is to look at what your I/O needs are, look at what your workflow is, and then make your decision from there.
Totally. So now, as an owner of a previous generation Apollo, I'm curious, can I add an Apollo X to my current setup?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So the cool thing about that is the whole Apollo system is built on, our modern Apollos are built on Thunderbolt. These are Thunderbolt 3, but Thunderbolt 3 is backward compatible with Thunderbolt 1 and Thunderbolt 2. So if you have an existing silver or black Apollo, you can easily add one of these guys to it. And you'll want to move this into your monitor position so you're listening through the new converters. But it's as simple as that. And one of the great things about the Apollo ecosystem is the driver and the Apollo console scales automatically. It just automatically discovers who's out there and creates a mixer and says, oh, here's all your channels. And you can create presets from there, change your I/O matrix and put your inputs and outputs where you need them to be. But there really is no more work to do after that. After that, it's just like what you create in your I/O matrix is what gets presented to Core Audio. And then Pro Tools or Logic or Cubase or Live see what you've presented and all of your inputs and outputs line up. So absolutely, adding an Apollo X to an existing Apollo, part of the plan.
Yeah, so that way you get more I/O, more DSP without having to sell your old unit or totally switch around how you work. You just add it to what you're already doing.
That's right.
Well, Gannon, thank you so much for taking the time today to chat about the Apollo X's. It's been really fascinating to learn a little bit more about what went into creating the Apollo X's and really what sets them apart from the previous generation Apollos. And for you guys, if you want to learn more about the Apollo X family, just go to uaudio.com, or even better, visit an authorized retailer and try it out for yourself. It's quite an experience. All right, see you guys next time.